Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up, which is also my O.W.L.s readathon wrap-up. I honestly read a lot of books in April. I think I got through 13 books, which sounds insane, but let me back up. A few of the books that I read actually were novellas, and I read a couple of graphic novels as well. So that makes it slightly less impressive, but I still can't believe how many books I got through. It's insane. So I'm not going to talk about every single book in this wrap-up, and the reason being is I read a lot of the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. There are 5 books out in this series right now, and I've already read 4 of them, so I just have one left, and I'm planning on reading that remaining one in May. So I'm actually going to do a separate wrap-up video with just that series, just talking about that series. I thought that'd be fun to do, and also to make this wrap up a little bit shorter. I will be talking about the very first book in the Wayward Children series though, because I completed that one to do an owl. So I will briefly talk about that one, but I'll talk about all the rest of them and everything in a different video. Like always, I'm going to use my trusty bullet journal to reference my notes to make sure I keep on track and remember what I want to say, because when I've read that many books in one month, I can't remember all my thoughts or all the things that happened in them, to be perfectly honest. My memory is not that great. So I'm going to be referencing my notes a lot. So if I'm looking away from the screen, my apologies, but I needed to keep on track. Let's go ahead and jump in. So for the O.W.L.s readathon, I wanted to become the career of Trader of Magical Tomes, which is a pretty awesome career, and I'm super pumped about it. And I'm happy to say that I passed all my O.W.L.s, folks. I had 6 O.W.L.s I wanted to pass, and I actually did 7 and added an additional one. And the very first book that I read that was to pass Ancient Runes was the book Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is the first book in the Wayward Children series. If you've never heard about it before, a basic idea of this series is that we have this boarding school that takes in kids that have returned from a magical place. So think Alice who goes to Wonderland, the Pevensey kids that go to Narnia, Dorothy that goes to Oz. Think about all these kids that go these magical places. A lot of them feel like that's their true home and where they can be their true selves. And then they return back to our world feeling lost and hopeless and just feel confused and like they don't fit in anymore. And so it's all about these kids who are trying to adjust living back into our world and also dealing with the fact that they may never return to their magical places, but they're all hoping that their magical doors will again return. So that's what we follow. All of these books are novellas, so this is a nice short book. And here's a few thoughts I had on it. I do wish it had been longer, which is something a lot of people say about all the books in this series. You just want things to be expanded upon more, and I definitely felt that as well. I would have liked to see more development on the characters. I love the idea of multiple kids all sharing the same experience of visiting a magical place. Now, every single kid went to all sorts of different worlds. There were all types of different ones. There were nonsense type ones when you think of like Wonderland. There were worlds that were like high logic and were extremely logical, or there's all these different worlds. Some of them were like dark underworld type places. So there's lots of different worlds these kids have been to, but I loved all the shared experiences they had of being at these different magical places. I will say sometimes the writing felt a bit abrupt, and I think I let the hype get to me on this one, but I do want to read the rest of the series. So I didn't end up loving the first book as much as I was hoping I would, but I did really enjoy it. I loved the concept. Sometimes the dialogue for me felt a little abrupt, and that might have been because just of the characters' personalities. There was one character in particular who went to a very nonsense type world, and she sort of talked nonsensically and talked nonstop. So sometimes she would be very abrupt in the things she said, and sometimes I would struggle with that a little bit. But all in all, I really enjoyed it a lot. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5, and I had a blast reading it, and that was Ancient Runes accomplished. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, a lot of the books that I read in April were on my Kindle, so I can't hold them up for you. I will list all the books that I mentioned in this video down below, though, so you can easily reference them, but I will hold up the ones that I do have. That one I read in my Kindle. The next book I actually do own, but a friend of mine is borrowing it, and that is Eleanor in Park by Rainbow Rowell. This was to complete my Charms exam. And my goodness, I am absolutely shocked how much I love this one. So Eleanor in Park is a YA contemporary book. We follow this boy and girl who first meet, and at first they don't meet under the best circumstances. They don't know what to think about each other. They honestly don't like each other that much. And they end up becoming friends and then becoming more than friends. And it's such a sweet romance story. I almost said romantical. I think that would have sounded weird. But I am shocked that I enjoyed this because, one, I don't read contemporaries. I'm the kind of person, like, I'm not really all that focused on the romance in a story. I would rather have everything else but the romance. I don't mind there being some in there. I just don't want the main focus of the story. So I went into this book thinking, I'm not going to like this. This is completely romance focused. It's going to be YA and super angsty. And it was angsty, but the angst made sense to me. It didn't feel like angsty just to be angsty. It was such a sweet, sweet story. I'm honestly surprised how much I love this book. It had some romanticized elements, but mostly felt very raw and real. And when I say that as well, there are some trigger warnings in this book for physical abuse as well as verbal abuse. It's something one of the character faces in this book, in her family life, and it's so hard to read, but it just makes it very raw and real. Everything's not so like sparkly and romanticized in this book. I loved these characters together and how their doesn't make sense relationship made so much sense. So these two kids that fall in love, I say kids because they're in high school, these two kids that fall in love, it doesn't make sense that they would. You would think they're just complete opposites, but they find mutual things that they enjoy. And through that develops this beautiful relationship. And so it's a relationship that shouldn't make sense, but it does. And that's what's so beautiful about it. This story is heartwarming and heartbreaking, and I hope to find another contemporary that gives me the same feeling. This actually opened me up more to reading more contemporary, which I'm excited about. I'm looking forward to hopefully I can't talk. Hopefully finding more contemporary books like this, ones that can really touch my heart, ones that feel raw and real and not just a mess of angsty teenage emotions. So I'm really excited that I actually feel more open to reading contemporary now. That's pretty cool. And with reading that, I passed my charms exams and I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I am nervous to talk about. So if you happen to watch my April TBR video, I received my very first ARC ever. And initially it was going to be a physical book, but some things in the mail happened and I didn't end up getting it, so I read it on my Kindle instead. I was so excited to read it. The author reached out to me personally and offered to let me read it ahead of time. It comes out this month in May. And I felt so honored, and I do feel so honored. And Kyle, if you're watching this, thank you again for offering this book to me. And I'm so grateful that I was able to read it. So thank you. The book is called Beast Heart. It is by Kyle Richardson, and I read this book to pass Transfiguration. So this story is a steampunk set story. I don't know what time period it's supposed to be. I don't know if it's supposed to be set in the future or the past. I don't know. But it's steampunk. And oh my goodness, I'm struggling to remember the plot all of a sudden. I read too many books this past month. We're following this girl whose hand is completely made out of steam. And so she has like this mechanical hand and she always feels like she's just doesn't fit in. She really hates kind of who she is in that respect. And then on the flip side, we follow this boy who is an orphan, and again he feels like an outsider as well, and something happens to him to where he starts transforming into a monster that he doesn't want to be. So we kind of follow these two separate characters for quite a bit of time. It's like every other chapter is one of those characters and eventually their stories converge. So that's kind of the basic idea of what this story is about. Honestly, this book ended up being a bit of a struggle for me. The plot and the atmosphere and the characters never seemed to grab me. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was because of the steampunk setting. This is the first time I ever read a steampunk book, and I just wonder if maybe it wasn't for me. I thought it would be, but it wasn't. And I'm really disappointed about that, to be honest. It's not the book. I just felt like it was me, and it was frustrating about that. I'm so honored and thankful that I was offered the ARC, and so heartbroken that it wasn't for me. I'm not going to go on and on about it a whole bunch because I don't want to just just rant about it or anything, but it just didn't end up being for me. This sounds like it's for you. Please look it up. Beast Heart by Kyle Richardson. Give it a look-see, see what you think. It just happened to not be for me, but that doesn't mean it's not for you. Personally, I'm not going to give my rating on this. I didn't put my rating on Goodreads because I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable rating this when it just really, really wasn't for me, and I didn't want to in any way hurt the rating for Kyle on Goodreads. I just didn't want to do that. So it just wasn't for me. I didn't particularly like it that much, but again, that doesn't mean it's not for you. So please give it a chance, give it a look if you think you're interested. But I passed Transfiguration. All right, the next one I read, I do actually have, and that is The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. This is a chunker right here. This one took me quite a while to read, and I am not going to lie, this book, it took me a long time to understand any semblance of plot. So let me see if I can try to describe what this book is about. We're following this girl who has the ability to time travel and to sort of affect time. She's able to slow down time and things like that, and she's also able to time travel. She time travels to the past in the 1920s to become a part of a heist that went wrong, and she's going to try to fix because she's wanting to steal something that the people in the heist are needing. We're following two different sort of magical people. It's not the right word. It's like, I can't think of the word right now. But it's societies. We're following two different societies. One is kind of like the old magic people. They're the people that have a magical affinity. Like each person can be born like this main girl we follow, where she's able to alter time, or some people are able to do other magical things. Like someone can make fire come from their hand, or that's just an example, but someone can have a magical affinity. Then there's another group of people that think that those people are bad, basically like the burn at the stake people. They're like, no, this is wrong, and they try to basically wipe these people out. So anyways, all I can say is a heist set in the 1920s. Let's just go with that, okay? So here are my thoughts on this book. I felt like it was trying to have a Diviners style atmosphere that honestly fell kind of flat for me. So if you haven't heard of Diviners, it's by Libra Bray. It's also set in the 1920s. It is a paranormal book, and it is creepy, very atmospheric as well. And I felt like this book was trying very much so to have that similar atmosphere as Diviners, and it didn't work for me in this one, which is such a bummer because I was excited about reading something in the 20s again. Often it felt slightly lost among the plot, so I couldn't seem to have a connection with the story or characters. I struggled. There were just so many minuscule things and particulars about this plot and the history of what was going on that I felt lost half the time. And I was vlogging while I was reading this book, and so many times there were several clips where I was trying to describe like what I was reading, but I wasn't really sure, and so I felt lost in a lot of this book, to be perfectly honest. And maybe it's because I wasn't connecting with it as much, and because of that I was struggling to follow what was going on. I don't know. I could tell it had unique concepts, but it just felt like something was missing. There were a lot of really cool concepts in this book, but yeah, I felt like something didn't quite connect for me. I didn't feel like it had needless content, but it felt long. And this book is long. This is a long book. At least for me it is. This is a long book, but I didn't feel like it could have been shorter. I don't feel like there's content that could have been cut out necessarily, which is a good thing. That's great. A lot of times you read a long book and you're having trouble following. Sometimes you're like, man, I wish this book was shorter. There was a lot of needless content. I didn't feel that way in this. I didn't feel like there was stuff that should have been left out, or it could have been shorter, which is a nice feeling when you're reading a longer book, I suppose. Of course, as I feared, the ending grabbed me and piqued my interest enough to possibly continue. So as I was reading most of this book, I'm like, okay, this is all right, but I don't think I'm going to continue the series, and that's how I felt the majority of reading it. And then, of course, the ending hits. There's lots of crazy stuff that happens, and there's a cliffhanger, and I'm like, oh, man, now I want to know what happens. So I think I will continue the series in the future. There's a second book that's out now. I think it's called The Devil's Thief. I can't remember. It's got a similar cover, but it's on fire. It's like got flames. But I think I might read the next one eventually, maybe. I was intrigued with the ending, and I want to know what's going to happen, but the majority of the book I didn't really enjoy. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. So I can see why people really love this. There's some people that rant and rave about this book, and they're like, oh my goodness, this book is amazing. And I can see why people really like it. I just think for me, it felt too complex. I had trouble tracking with what was going on. and I just don't think it was for me. So, but I'm glad I read it. It was cool. I'm glad to understand the hype behind it and why people do like it. So, and with that, I passed History of Magic. Oh my goodness. All right, so at that point, I had finished all of the exams I needed to do Trader of Magical Tomes, and so now I started adding some extras. So this next one I did is actually a graphic novel. Unexpectedly so, is Piper by J. Asher and Jessica Freeburg. I was supposed to read a short book for potions. That's what the prompt was, to read something under 150 pages. So I chose this book called Piper, and it's supposed to be a retelling of the Pied Piper. And I was like, okay, cool. So I had it on my Kindle, and I opened it up, and that's when I realized it's a graphic novel. I legitimately did not know it was a graphic novel. I don't know how I missed that. I don't know how I didn't know, but I didn't know. So, surprise, it was a graphic novel. I struggled to read it on my Kindle. Kindle screens are really not that big, and they're not really that conducive for reading graphic novels. Also, mine is the Kindle Paperwhite, so there's no color or anything on it. So I struggled reading the very small dialogue print. So that was a hindrance to me as well. First of all, I didn't initially realize it's a graphic novel. Like I just said, I struggled to read it on the Kindle. It's supposed to be a retelling of the Pied Piper, but it didn't add much to the story. It kind of threw in a little bit of a romance arc, but that's about it. It was pretty much the same. There wasn't anything different about it. I don't read very many graphic novels, so I feel like I don't have a lot of legitimacy in my rating of a graphic novel. There wasn't anything wrong with the art style. Like, at least what I was able to see visually on a Kindle Paperwhite, it looked really nice. I would have liked to actually seen a physical copy. I'm assuming the physical copy probably was in color. I would have liked to seen that. That probably would have enriched the experience for me. But it didn't add much. I didn't feel like connected with any of the characters, or felt I don't know. I just didn't feel connected with it. Granted, it's a graphic novel, so it's really short, but I just don't feel like much to the story was added. I didn't feel like, I don't know. I just didn't feel like it didn't add much to the original fairy tale or the original folk tale of the Pied Piper. I just don't have many thoughts on it, but just overall, I wasn't feeling it. So I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. It was just kind of meh for me, but thankfully, it was a very short graphic novel, so I read it very fast, and that completed another exam, my potions exam. So, moving on, we've got a few more left, folks. We got this. So, for my Defense Against the Dark Arts exam, I read House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. This book is a book that's become very popular on BookTube. It came out, I think, last year in 2019. I'm pretty positive, maybe towards mid of the year, something like that. I don't know. It is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, which I thought was super fascinating because that's not a fairy tale you normally hear gets a retelling. Usually it's the classics, right? Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, Rapunzel, things like that. You don't normally hear 12 Dancing Princesses. And I know I've read the original at some point in my life because I knew what it was and I knew I'd read it, but it's not one like you often go back to read. It's not one you often get out to read to your children. But I was excited to see what was done with it. And you guys, I loved this one. I loved it. It was such a good retelling. It was dark. It was spooky. The atmosphere was so good, you guys. It was so good. All right, let me dive into my notes before I just start blathering about random stuff about it. I loved the large manor, ghosty, spooky atmosphere. So this whole entire book takes place on this cluster of islands in the ocean, of course. Duh, that's what an island is. That was a dumb explanation. But with this, we're following this family that has 12 sisters in it. So lots of girls. They all live on this manor by the sea. And it's this really large manor that's kind of haunted and spooky. And there's a lot of storms all the time. It's just got this perfect spooky vibe that is just, I live for it. It was a very original retelling of a classic fairy tale. I enjoyed the bond between the sisters. I love that kind of familial interaction. It was great. I loved that. I love seeing the bond between the sisters and the bickering and just the family. I really enjoyed that a lot. There's a lot of mystery to this book, and the mystery made me want to keep turning the page. I wanted to know what was going to happen. I was just like, oh my goodness, this is really, really cool. I was a bit disappointed with that climactic conclusion, though. It fell flat for me for some reason. So there was so much buildup in this book. This is mainly focused on a mystery. So I guess you could say it's a paranormal mystery retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses. That's kind of the best way to describe this. And I was so excited to kind of get to the conclusion of this mystery. It was just so spooky, and it was just really pushing me onward to find out what happens. And when it got to the big reveal, it was kind of what I had maybe initially suspected might happen, but slight twist on it to where I was like, that's it? Like, that's I don't know how I feel about that conclusion. Like, it didn't hit me right for some reason. It ended up going too far in this, like, paranormal direction, sort of, with, like, gods and goddesses twist to it. I don't know. It was just like this specific way that they ended it. I was just like, I wasn't sure how I felt about it, which is kind of disappointing because I enjoyed the book so much. The atmosphere was so good. It didn't ruin it for me, though. I will say that. I still really, really loved this book. This is one I would love to buy someday, to have on my shelf and not just have on my Kindle. I would love to have a physical copy of it. It's a beautiful book. I really enjoyed reading it. I wouldn't mind rereading it at some point. It was so good. Overall, it was spooky fun. I would love to see more underused fairy tales for retellings. I would love to see more because I love reading retellings of fairy tales that aren't often told, or ones that maybe we have in the back of our mind that were told to us or we read someday. But I just really liked it. I loved that this more obscure fairy tale was used to create such a fantastic, spooky book. So I highly recommend it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars as well. So good, you guys. So good. Oh my goodness. I loved it. I want to reread it right now while I'm thinking about it. Okay. I have 2 more books. Let's do this. All right. So the next one that I read was one I had added on, and that was Arithmancy. This is one I just added out of the blue because there was a specific book I really wanted to read and wanted to see if I could fit it into a prompt, and I could, and that is The Silent Patient by, oh my goodness, I forgot. I can't pronounce this person's name. Alex Michaelides? Ooh, I butchered that so terribly. I'm so sorry. Don't tear me to shreds in the comments down below. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm so sorry. But you've probably heard of The Silent Patient. This is an adult thriller, which is not something I normally read, and I was so pumped to read this. I've been wanting to read it for a long time. If you've never heard of The Silent Patient before, it's all about this famous couple. The husband is this famous photographer. The wife is this famous painter, and from the outside looking in, they had a wonderful marriage. They loved each other very, very much. All of a sudden, out of the blue, the wife shoots her husband point blank in the face several times, killing him, of course. And afterwards, she goes completely silent. She refuses to speak. And she ends up being put in this psych ward, this mental hospital, where she's just there and not talking. And nobody knows why she did it. Nobody knows anything about what happened that night when it happened. And then on the other hand, we flip to this psychotherapist who really wants to become employed at the specific psychiatric ward so that he thinks he can get her to talk. He thinks that he wants to help her and wants to find out what happened. And so it's all about him getting a job there and starting to be her psychotherapist and trying to get her to talk and find out what happened all those years ago. Why did she murder her husband? All that kind of stuff. So it sounded like a really intriguing idea. I was really pumped to jump into this thriller, into this mystery. I wanted to know what was going to happen. This thriller was so much fun. I feel hooked on the genre now, and I can't wait to read another. The thrillers. I can't wait to read more thrillers. It had an asylum setting that sets you on edge, and the mystery of why the patient is silent is intriguing. It's assumed, since it's a thriller, that there would be some twists, and boy, they left me feeling disoriented and honestly mind blown. There were some twists in this book, one in particular that I literally stopped reading, set my book down, and just sort of stared into space. I was like, what just happened? Like, I just felt so disoriented because it's just like, everything I know was a lie. I just felt so freaked out, and I was really glad. A really good friend of mine, she had read it very recently, and so I was able to video message her and just be like, what? I was excited I was able to talk to her about it, because this is one of those books you just read it and you want to tell somebody, but nobody would understand unless they've read it. And it was just the twists were so good. If you're new to the genre of thrillers, I suggest starting with this one. Definitely worth the hype. There's a lot of hype behind this book, and my goodness, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's so good. Please read it. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad this is one of the first thrillers I've read, because now I just want to read more. And it was so well done, and I cannot believe that that was this guy's like premiere book. I can't wait to read more thrillers by him, because wow. All right, that was For Arithmancy. Let's do the very last book that I'm going to share with you today, and it is also one I own, and I just sort of read it out of the blue, and that is Thornhill by Pam Smy, or Smy, S-M-Y. This is a middle grade graphic novel, basically, is what you can say about it. It's kind of it's a mixed media. It's a graphic novel, but it also is interspersed with diary entries. So there's a lot of written words as well, not like pictures with bubbles of characters saying things. It's not like that. The pictures are literally just pictures. I'll give you an example. There'll be pictures like this. So this is a very thick book. It's very heavy. You could kill someone with this thing. But it's a very fast read, because there are a lot of illustrations in it. But then there's a lot of diary entries as well. This is, let me just read this on the back, because it's the quickest way I can think to describe it. A lonely girl in a new town, a ghostly figure in the window, a derelict old house, and a mystery spanning the decades. So it sounds really cool, doesn't it? It just grabs you with that. So this is basically a spooky paranormal ghost story that jumps back and forth between present day and the past, and these past diary entries. And it's really atmospheric. It's well done. Everything is in black and white. As you can see, the entire book is in black and white, and it creates this very spooky atmosphere. Even though it's such a basic thing just to have everything in monotone, it creates this really, really spooky atmosphere. It's an interesting mix of graphic novel and diary entries. The images and heavy use of dark tones really created an atmosphere. It's a really thick book, but it's a quick read. I enjoyed to me, what I found to be an unexpected ending. I enjoyed the way the ending was done. It was not what I expected at all. And I was like, oh, that's surprising. That's really cool. Overall, it's a fun flip through book. This is a really fun book to just quickly read and flip through. It's beautiful. It's just a really, really cool book, and I really enjoyed reading it. I don't have much else to say other than that. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It was a lot of fun. I had a good time with it. Okay, at that, this has been almost 30 minutes of a video. If you have made it this long, thank you. I appreciate it. If any of these books I mentioned today that you have read, let me know what you thought about them down below. Also, let me know how your April reading went. How many books did you read? Did you do the owls? If you did you pass all your owls? Let me know. On this side of the screen over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel, follow me on my book journey, please do. On this side over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye.